My name is Justin Gage, and you're tuned in to the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast with your host, Jason Woodbury.
Think differently music. Music creates order out of chaos, for rhythm imposes unanimity upon the divergent, melody imposes continuity upon the disjointed, and harmony imposes compatibility upon the incongruous. Yehudi Menuhin.
Welcome back. Music is never entirely incidental in a movie made by our guest this week, director, collage artist, and music maker Jim Jarmusch. If you've ever seen any of his movies like Mystery Train or Down by Law, you know that it serves as a through line running through his characters' black comedy gags and existential wanderings. Jarmusch's movies don't always adhere to the same stylistic template, but music is always integral to what's happening on screen. The soundtrack to one of his films, 2014's vampire yarn Only Lovers Left Alive, was recently reissued by Sacred Bones Records, which also puts out albums by Jim's band, SQÜRL, and it features lutenist Jozef Van Wissem and guest appearances by Madeline Follin of Cults, Zola Jesus, and Yasmine Hamdan. Jarmusch joined us from his place in upstate New York to discuss the pastoralism that defines his creative practice these days, his early time in the New York underground, collaborators like John Lurie and Steve Buscemi, and of course music, Neil Young, Tom Waits, Iggy, Wu-Tang Clan, and beyond. We hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, please share it with your friends. You can rate and review the show if you feel moved to do so. And if you want to take your support a step further, you can check out Aquarium Drunkard on Patreon. All right, I'm very excited to share this one. Here's me in conversation with Jim Jarmusch. Thanks for listening to Transmissions. I'll speak with you more on the other side. Jim, thanks so much for joining us here on Transmissions. I'm very thrilled to have you here.
Thanks, Jason. Happy to be here.
Well, to start this episode off, we heard a few selections from your discography, or stuff that's associated with you at least. We heard your Wu-Tang infomercial, one of them from the Wu-Tang Clan Meets Indie Culture Volume 1. Then we heard SQÜRL's Streets of Detroit. And then I played a tiny bit of Kurt Weill's Losing Momentum for Jim Jarmusch, which is, of course, his slowed down 33 RPM remix of a 45. You eventually you heard that at some point, right? And invited him to do All Tomorrow's Parties?
Well, actually, I'd invited him before, and then I heard that, and then I felt kind of funny, like, oh, you're just inviting him because he did it. But I was just interested in his music, and then after already kind of trying to figure out the roster for the ATP thing, then I found out about that beautiful piece of music he made. I was very honored.
Isn't it? It's. I mean, I like the original too when it's played at the right speed, but when you put it in that register, the 33 RPM register, it just sounds so ghostly and beautiful. It's really a pretty remarkable and evocative thing.
Yeah, it really is. But I love those minor changes to things. I like you. I have a great looping pedal, but you can take it to half speed, which I'm playing with that a lot, reversing tracks and slowing them down. And, but I have a kind of slow rhythm in the way I talk, in the music I make, in the films I make. And I think Kurt kind of honed in on that too, in a way. So, yeah, I was just kind of honored. I thought it was really cool piece of music.
Yeah.
But he's a remarkable, he's a remarkable musician.
He sure is. Big fan of him here. When we spoke for Aquarium Drunkard a couple of years ago, I think you mentioned that you'd assembled a studio in the Hudson Valley. Have you been able to safely access it over the last year and a half?
Yeah, I'm living there now. I've been mostly living up here. I'm there now. So I've been up here working. My studio I'm still troubleshooting some annoying hums and buzzes and things, but with the kind of music I make, that's not a catastrophe.
Yeah.
So I work in there almost every day, either on music or art or writing. But yeah, it's the size of one large garage bay. It actually was part of my garage. So it really is a garage studio. But yeah, I'm in heaven. I just record onto, I go through Focusrite into GarageBand, but I have a lot of pedals and effects, and I've gathered some nice instruments, and I'm kind of in heaven when I'm in my garage.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've got all sorts of collaborators. Have you been able to have other people in there with you, or has the last year and a half mostly been you working on your own?
It's been me alone and then trading tracks,
Yeah.
Because I'm way behind, but I'm supposedly making a new record with Jozef Van Wissem because we've made a few now. But he's waiting still for my tracks. I was delayed by some things I was troubleshooting in my studio. Carter Logan and I are working on some stuff. I've been gathering a whole collection of solo almost all electric guitar pieces. That would be like a double record. I have enough stuff for that. So yeah, collecting a lot of stuff. Working on a few other projects that I don't know if I can mention because I'm not sure if they're announced yet, but one of them involves remixes. I think I could mention it. No, I don't know. It's like, anyway, no, I won't. I'll just leave those go. But a couple of cool things I'm working on too musically now.
Yeah, that sounds pretty great. I mean, obviously the recent stretch of time has been pretty brutal in so many ways, but as far as being able to hole up in the studio and work on stuff, I suppose there hasn't been much else to do, so it's a good time for that.
Well, yeah, it's been brutal in a lot of ways and sad and strange. But for me, it's been the really good thing is I have for years been trying to live most of my time up here in the Catskills, and just part of my time in the city. And I used to be up here like maybe 1/4 of the time. And now I've pretty much flipped that. So I'm in the city maybe only 1/4 or 1/6 of the time lately. And for me, that's like a dream come true because I love New York City. I love traveling. I've spent my life traveling. I've spent my life, a lot of my adult life living in New York, which I do deeply love, even though it's changed in a lot of ways that I don't love. But up here, it's like I'm in the woods. I have a room where I can record music. I can work on art. I have a book of newsprint collages coming out soon in June, anthology books, and a show coming up in September at James Fuentes Gallery in New York. So, and I'm making more of those. I have a little screening room in the other room where I have the Criterion channel, which I call my drug dealer, so
yeah.
I have incredible films. I try to watch at least one film every evening. And then I can make music, work on art. I'm working on a book of poems. I have, little scripts I'm not working on as much as I had intended. But it's like a dream, and it's very, very quiet and secluded. And there's a lot of birds and animals. I've been getting up recently for this one project to record the dawn chorus of birds at like between 5 and 6 a.m. And because in May, now's the time all the birds have returned, and it is insane. It is amazing. So I have some recordings of those now, some tracks that I'm going to add some things to, maybe with Carter. It's just nice to live in a place where, there are bears walking around if you're not careful, and coyote. Last night I saw a pair of beautiful owls right outside my house, and they went from one tree to another tree. These were very large owls, and incredible. When owls fly, they make no sound. That's why they're such kind of scary predators if you're their prey, because the front edge of their wings is serrated in a way that it's silent.
Yeah.
So these owls, they were large animals, and they'd just sort of jump off the branch and then catch themselves with their wings and cruise. And I didn't hear a thing, So that was kind of cool. So, I'm seeing all that kind of stuff. I hear coyotes at night. I come out of my little studio at midnight. Sometimes there's like a deer standing there,
Yeah.
So it's just kind of great. I love that kind of stuff. So I've kind of been in heaven part of this pandemic thing, getting to just be up here and work on my own stuff and create things. It's been kind of great. At first it was cool because I was like, yeah, nobody can ask me can you come and do a Q&A at the Metrograph, a theater I really love. But now I'm like, no, I'm upstate. But then it's like, can you do it by Zoom? And it's like, oh, damn it. This Zoom thing,
They got you. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's good too. So anyway, yeah, I'm really digging it up here. I really love it. And I can make music as loud as I want all night long. I don't have neighbors close enough to hear it. What am I going to bother the foxes outside,
Yeah, yeah. Well, your work is known for, you've already alluded to it, the sort of patient pace at which things move. Whether it's a comedy like The Dead Don't Die or something more atmospheric like Patterson, which I guess is it's sort of a comedy in my mind. I don't know how, a very gentle comedy, but whatever you do, even something that's a little bit more atmospheric or brooding like Limits of Control or Ghost Dog, that slow, patient crawl is always present in your work and in your musical work as well. I think so many people's perception, at least I certainly know my own perception of time has changed so much through the pandemic, and natural pace has been sort of, in a weird way, disrupted. Did you find that your routines changed, or your perception of the way you think of hours has changed at all over the last year?
Well, yeah, for a lot of last year, I wouldn't even know what day it was anymore. It'd be like, really? It's Saturday?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that changed a lot, but not in any way that was upsetting. It was kind of a nice way to just drift, because then you'd call your friends and then they'd say the same thing, like, wait, what day is it? So everyone was kind of suspended. But as far as that personal rhythm of things, of expression, I don't analyze those. I don't really know where that comes from. It's kind of like if you were to ask Cy Twombly, why are your paintings so kind of minimal? Or if you ask, certain musicians like Morton Feldman, why is everything so slow and spare?
Right.
Some people just have certain rhythms of expression. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to, I guess, Josh Safdie, the Safdie brothers, whose films I like a lot. And we were saying, I said, I love your films so much sometimes because they're very, very different than the rhythm I would ever find. And he was laughing, saying, me and my brother were saying that recently about your films. Like, well, we really dig his films because they're nothing like the rhythm we would ever right. embark on. And so, it's an but I don't really know where that stuff really comes from. I know that when I first started making films, I was very much inspired by very kind of pure classical approaches to telling a story with a camera, like Robert Bresson or Mitsuguchi and Ozu, the Japanese directors. And I really like that kind of purity and that kind of rhythm. And then also I started making films really at the time when MTV just sort of emerged, making these essentially visual commercials for pop songs, right?
Yeah.
And, part of me reacted contrarily to that because I am a contrary. And I was like, yeah, man, I don't want to make anything with that kind of rhythm. I mean, even now, when you watch action films, they have a thing where, nothing's on more than 3 seconds before there's an edit. And then occasionally a long shot will last 5 or 6 seconds, I got to say, after 5 minutes of that shit, I got a headache, and I can't deal with that 3 seconds and then a cut. It drives me nuts. So
yeah,
it might just be part of my way of perceiving things that I find that very annoying, I got to say.
So much of Patterson, which is one of my favorites of yours, is centered on repeated rhythms and patterns, that feeling of day in and day out. That kind of went away for a lot of people during the pandemic, but I wonder, do you find that you kind of keep to your own personal, I mean, do you have your own repeated rhythms that play throughout your days, just in terms of your personal rituals or things like that?
I do a little bit, I try to do some physical things first. Lately, I walk 3 miles a day, and I often do some Tai Chi, at the end of which I have some meditation period. Mm-hmm. So I like to do that as a kind of what I do every day. And then the rest of the day varies depending on obligations I have or what free time I get to escape into my studio.
Yeah.
So those things vary, but I do try to have a certain rhythm of first paying attention to my, myself as a machine or whatever, my physical being that's obviously connected to my whatever, my chi. So I try to pay attention to that and then proceed with the day, but not much more than that. But, you mentioned like repetition and variations in Patterson, but I think you'll find them in all my films and music too. There's something these are kind of gold mines for me. I love variations. I love them in, from Bach to Warhol to, whatever, the idea of things being varied. And that's what nature is too. And it shows you endless variations. And those things, really inspire me. Like I'm an amateur mycologist and ornithologist, right? I for years, I tried mushroom identification and bird identification, but like fungi, there are like, I don't know, 50,000, I don't know how many different species there are, 4 times more than plants, right? Mm-hmm. But just the idea of the variations and the minute differences in species and variations in nature is insane. I was watching this documentary about Oliver Sacks, and he was part of his life he was obsessed with ferns, and because there are so many variants of just that one plant, which are very, very ancient, right? So I was kind of interested in his fascination with the varieties of them. And then repetition, I mean, that's like oh man, such a beautiful kind of form to use in so many ways in art and music and everything, architecture, and so right. I always, those things just are innate for me. They're kind of like guiding paths, repetition and variation.
Talking about some of the endless variety of mushrooms or things like that. A while back on the podcast, we had an author, Noah Lekis, and Ethan Miller from the group Comets on Fire and Howlin' Rain, and we were we were sort of talking about being music listeners, and I mentioned that I've talked with some friends who will tell me things like that it bums them out that they're never going to be able to hear all of the things that they should hear, because there's just so much out in the world. They're never going to hear all the records they should hear or see all the films they should see or read all the books they should read. I kind of feel more drawn to the opposite of that. That fills me with hope, knowing that I'm going to die with stuff left unheard or unseen, because to me, the thing that I love in art and that I love in music is that sense that as long as there are people, there are going to be variations and mutations and things are going to develop in new fascinating ways. And to me, that fills me with a lot more hope than it bums me out. You know what I mean?
I do. I have like both sides of that. Like I was thinking just the other day, I'm not so young anymore. I've spent a lot of my life collecting vinyl records and then unfortunately CDs, and I still have cassettes, and then I have DVDs and all these things. And I was just looking at my vinyl collection and thinking, man, if I just start putting these on the turntable now until the rest of my life, I'll never play them all again.
Right,
it's like,
right.
And then there are all these new things I want to find out about, which are overwhelming because you can't keep track. Like if you just look at hip hop alone, everything's changed. Now a hip hop hit will be a hit for a month at the most.
Right.
And then the next thing, it's like, I can't keep track, Mm-hmm. But I'm with you because what I love is to wake up each morning and think, God, what great piece of music or book or film or what might I discover that I never even knew about,
Yeah.
And so the endless possibilities just really inspire me. And I was sort of criticized in some ways for this, but the heart of the film, Only Lovers Left Alive, is sort of about that because, and some, I guess critically people said I'm an elitist or whatever, because those two characters, Adam and Eve, they've lived for hundreds of years. So their knowledge and appreciation of things is incredibly vast, and yet they're still interested in learning new stuff. I really feel like what might I discover today that I never experienced before?
Yeah. What are you like as a music listener? Do you tend to focus on a few albums for like a sustained period of time, or do you cycle through things pretty frequently?
Well, I'm a fanatic, so I can't, I'm very indulgent by, how can I say, just by what I feel like, So I go through periods. Like last week, I made a mixtape of, on digital of John Cage, music of John Cage. And then I found certain pieces that were interpreted by different performers, a certain piano piece. So I put like 5 in a row and they're just slightly different, So, I had a big John Cage day, but, I might wake up and I've got to hear Miami by the Gun Club, or I've got to hear, I got to go back. Oh my God, it's Ghostface Killer's birthday. I got to listen to some of his stuff So it really varies so much as to whether I'm going to listen to, some maybe obscure classical music, or I'm going to listen to, I don't know, some metal stuff, stoner metal neuroses, or if I want to listen to Royal Trucks, or I don't know. Like I'm sort of a fanatic, so it's really variable, but I listen to music a lot.
Yeah.
And, music is really, I think, the most beautiful form of human expression, I gotta say. I love movies because they're the closest to dreams in a way. You can sort of tap into sort of the illogic or lack of logic of dreams. You can also, movies can be very traditional in terms of narrative and telling stories, which is such a beautiful ancient form, but a film can be like a dream because it has imagery, It has its own rhythm. It has sounds. But music is so pure. You know, I think sometimes I saw some footage on YouTube of like, I think it was Eric B. and Rakim playing somewhere in Central Europe, or I might be imagining this, but people were singing along, but they don't know what the lyrics are.
Yeah.
They're like mouthing along to Rakim. How can that even be? But the music was still so important. It was hitting them. They were feeling it, you know?
Right.
So I don't know. Music is just remarkable to me. It's so magical.
Another thing you mentioned when we last spoke is that at that point you were listening to the then current posthumous Alan Vega record, It. Have you been able to listen to his new one, Mutator, which is on the Sacred Bones?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yes. I've been trying to think of something I could do because Liz, his wife, you know, she's really a remarkable person, and they're trying to get other artists that really love Alan Vega's work to like create little things around Mutator. And I wanted to write something or make some small film, but I've been sucked away in so many things. But yeah, I've been blasting Mutator for like a month or two now. Excellent.
The notion that there's more in the Vega vault is also something that makes me very happy and excited to know, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And hats off to Martin Rev too. You know, I like his solo stuff as well, but those guys,
a lot of it
really.
So much of it is fantastic. Those two are their esteem only grows.
Yeah, it's really true, you know?
Well, so you've always worked with a lot of musicians in your films. You started playing when you were in your early 20s or so, is that right?
Yeah.
What drew you to play?
Playing in quotes. Well, what drew me was the wild enthusiasm in New York City and the East Village, Lower East Side of like making our own music that could be amateuristic, you know? And that whole thing was just exhilarating. That, you know, I've said this in other interviews, but there was a time in the late 70s where there were flyers up posted everywhere in the East Village that at one point that said, "Everyone here is in a band." And it was kind of true, you know?
Yeah.
But it was so exciting that, oh man, this isn't fueled by professionalism or I'm going to get over, or it was like fueled by expression. And, you know, the people starting that, you know, and all of these things are like, I look at all forms of expression and like schools of music as just waves in the ocean that break off of one another. So, you know, but what kind of exploded in the, you know, in the Lower East Side at that point around Max's, and then of course CBGB's, and then after that other clubs, and then the so-called, you know, no wave period was amazing because there was also a renunciation of like just playing blues-based rock and roll, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, let's see what else can happen here. And that's very important to me. And as much as I have huge, you know, idols in guitar music of, you know, Link Wray and Ron Ashton and stuff, I got to say, I am just not really any more interested in kind of blues-based rock and roll. I heard a quote recently from Julian Casablancas saying that he was just bored with that, you know?
Yeah,
But I realized like a few months ago, I have a weird aversion to hearing like guitar breaks in songs that I just don't want to hear that shit anymore. Like I've heard that a million fucking times. I don't want to hear these, you know, I don't know. I just can't do it. I have to turn it off. I got to hear something else now. Sure. And I love electric guitars. I love it, but I'm getting so bored with that, you know, repeated riffing of stuff. It doesn't do anything for me. It's gotten to a point where, you know, it's not just that I ignore it, it's now that I avoid it.
Sure.
But, I go through phases, so I don't know what I'm saying, but.
Well, so when you start, you played keyboards in the Del Byzantines, right?
Yeah, I played keyboards and did sort of joint vocals at times, yes.
Do you remember your first guitar? What was your first electric or acoustic guitar?
My first electric was a Hagstrom, a red sort of Strat copy that I got in a pawn shop on like 9th Avenue in the 40s in New York.
Yeah.
And it was cheaper than any actual Fender guitar at the time. And I had no money. So that was my first electric that I had, back then.
Did the freedom of the no wave thing, in which people were able to be very, abstract with what they were doing, deconstructive with what they were doing, do you think that appealed to you in part because of sort of the qualifications for being in a band had basically vanished at that point, basically? Do you feel like that was part of what you were excited about, was that it was sort of uncharted waters?
Well, it was two things. I mean, a little bit before that kind of stuff, I got to say Patti Smith and Television 2 were incredibly inspiring, because they were saying, hey, we're rock and roll musicians because we fucking say we are.
Yeah.
And here's what we're going to express. And I found that really still moving, And there was so many bands like that, obviously, the Ramones and their kind of formula, which I still love. And I still think, Joey Ramone was in love with like Ronnie Spector and that kind of girl group stuff, and how that got translated into the Ramones is such a beautiful thing to me.
Yeah, that's my favorite quality of theirs.
Oh yeah, so beautiful. But so that stuff meant a lot to me. But I was also obviously interested in all kinds of music, including avant-garde, so-called classical music, and certainly like outside jazz. And, I loved Ornette Coleman and Albert Ayler and these kind of things. So when that sort of so-called rock musicians, or that little scene, expanded into not blues-based rock and roll, like DNA particularly, and that kind of stuff, man, that just really, I just loved that. It just opened my mind. Like, even this form doesn't have to be based on any kind of cliche or expectation. So, then there was Glenn Branca and people using those, what's the word, that kind of instrumentation. But, and I remember seeing Glenn Branca's band Theoretical Girls, for example, and stuff like that. I was just like, wow, okay, we can go anywhere we want with this stuff. This is really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a funny experience. I maybe have talked about this once before, but I was friends with Tim Wright, who was, in DNA, and of course, previously in Pere Ubu at one point. And, we're both from Ohio, but this was in New York. And Tim said he would give me a few guitar lessons. So I was in his apartment, and and I couldn't play guitar for shit, and he showed me these chords, which were very unusual and very difficult to play. And he said, okay, just practice going between these two chords over and over. And then next week, come back, And I said, okay, cool. So I practiced these very weird sounding chords. I don't even know what they were. And then I went back, and Tim said, okay, can you play those over and over? And I was like, yeah, kind of. And then while I played them, he turned on a recorder and was working out a piece of music of his own, So he was, and I, hey, I caught on to this. I was like, Tim, man, you're just using me for that. And he said, well, yeah, that's kind of what I was doing. I'm no guitar teacher.
That's amazing. So you're a recording artist before you're even really sure that's happening.
This was cassette, practice tape, where he was working on a piece of his with two guitar parts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and very odd, Tim Wright type guitar parts. What a great musician and person he was too.
Well, so like I had mentioned, you obviously people like Tom Waits and Iggy and the Wu-Tang Clan guys. These people have all factored into your films, but you've also made movies specifically about music. The Stooges documentary and Neil Young, Year of the Horse. How does doing something like that affect your relationship with the subjects that you're covering in those films with their work?
Wait, say that again? I was just sorry. I drifted away because I was thinking about John Lurie, because I was thinking about the beautiful things he did in our first films, Stranger Than Paradise, where he made, he had a string quartet. And and in Down by Law, I met all these incredible musicians at that time because he brought in Mark Rebo and all these people that are since friends for many years, And, there's something about John's, also his openness to music and acting and doing various things as an artist that was very inspiring to me too. And working with him, I'm just going back because, I don't know. And I remember in those early days in the late 70s, like Jean-Michel Basquiat was a friend of ours, but he really kind of followed John around because John encouraged him to play the clarinet and Jean was into that. And Jean was very young and he really liked, John was kind of inspiring. He used to call him Willie Mays, I remember. But John was very important in that way musically too. And then next I got to work with Tom Waits. And then after that, of course, with Neil and RZA and, these amazing people, all of them, were real gifts. But sorry, I drifted back to John for a second because.
No, that's great. I'm a big fan of his for sure. I really enjoyed his painting show.
I love his paintings. I didn't see all the shows, but I love his paintings. But
yeah.
Anyway, all of those people, so important to me. And then getting to work with a lot of musicians, starting with John and Richard Edson, and even Esther Ballant in Stranger Than Paradise was also, she's still a great musician,
Yeah.
She's a wonderful musician. And, and then Screamin' Jay Hawkins and Joe Strummer and Iggy and all these incredible people that I got to work with both also as actors. But then getting back to your question was about Neil and Iggy and those films.
Yeah, and if making something like that, because making a film is involved and very, very, intensive at times, I wonder if it changes the way you hear or perceive their music when you work with somebody that closely.
No, because, that was like lifeblood already. I was just thrilled first of all, to work with those guys.
Right.
And then to make a film about their music, I was already, come on, the Stooges, that's like my blood. I'm like Midwestern Stooges, MC5, and then a lot of, black music of the time, but basically R&B, what was called R&B back then, and soul music. That was my blood, So those guys are heroic to me. And Crazy Horse, I love all of Neil's music, but Crazy Horse is like, I don't know, that just speaks so deeply to me, the wildness of it.
Well, the wildness of it and the meditative, the sort of, obviously you've explored a lot of drone in your own work, films and music, but
yes, for sure.
To get ready for this interview, I went back and listened to a bunch of stuff, but I listened to the Year of the Horse soundtrack, and I love that it opens with that, it's all one song. Neil says that at the beginning, and it's like, the film, your film about them kind of like captures that quality in a positive way, because it feels immersive, like you slip into the Crazy Horse slipstream, and then you're just sort of in it. And all of Neil's stuff is all over the map at times, but when he's with Crazy Horse, something very elemental happens that I just love. What kind of Oh, go ahead.
Also, Neil, Neil is very intuitive. I am also, and I learned a lot from being with Neil about always, and I've learned it from other people. The great DP, the director of photography, Robbie Mueller, certainly taught me to always trust your instincts and don't analyze shit. Like, make sure, you're feeling it and trust your feelings. And I remember Neil saying to me once during the Year of the Horse filming stuff, he said, or maybe it was it was about Crazy Horse. He said, we never, ever think about what we're doing. That would just ruin it, man, because they don't, it's not about that. It's like feeling it. And the beauty of Crazy Horse too is somehow in the imperfection in a way of the rhythm section of, Ralph Molina and Billy Talbot. They are not metronomic musicians. You know what I mean? There's a elastic thing that moves around because it's not perfect. And that is what makes them so great too. And Neil knows that. He loves that,
Yeah, it's that human quality, the sort of the perfectly imperfect thing that happens, where it sounds natural in it doesn't just sound natural, it sounds like extra natural or something. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah. If you ever mentioned like a click track, probably Pancho would have pulled a gun on me. You know what I mean?
Of course.
we don't do that.
What kind of conversations did you have with Neil about Dead Man before he recorded the soundtrack? Did you have any? Did you sort of lay out some thoughts, or did you guys just sort of go into it a little bit, blind is probably the wrong word, but, a little bit less formed?
Well, we had an interesting thing. Like, I had given him this, I met him while we were shooting because we had a day off in Arizona at one point, and Crazy Horse was playing, and I was able to get a whole bunch of tickets for the crew and everybody who wanted to go. So we saw them. Oh, a beautiful show. And then it was like around the period of Sleeps with Angels, I think, that album. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, I got to meet Neil through Elliot, because I knew Frank, who worked with Elliot. I got to hook up through Rick Ocasek, who helped hook me up with. So anyway, Elliot hooked me up so I could come and just talk to Neil after that show. And I remember saying, Neil, and introducing myself, and I said, yeah, we're shooting this film, and really, I just wanted to see if you might be interested in, scoring it later. And he looked at me and said, I don't make plans. And he was about to get on his bus. And then he turned back and said, I'll tell you what, when you have a rough cut, man, send it to me. And I promise you, I will respond in a matter of days. I give you my word of whether I have if I feel it, right?
Sure.
So when I had a rough cut months later, I got it to Neil. And 2 days later, he calls me up saying, hey, I want to do this. I love this film. I want to do the score. Can you fly out here, and hang out in my ranch for a few days and we can talk? So I got to fly to California. I got picked up. I got taken to Neil's incredible Broken Arrow Ranch. I got to stay overnight for 2 nights and just talk. And Elliot was there. So first, Neil said he had the interest of getting Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic from Nirvana. Kurt was gone, right? And he said, maybe I should get those 2 guys, and it would be the 3 of us, And wow. I said, that's pretty interesting. I don't know. And then we would talk. We hung out for 2 full days. And then he said, and then I said, did you ever see, I'm not a big Eric Clapton fan, I must admit, but he did a beautiful sort of solo electric guitar thing for this film, Stephen Frear's film, The Hit, which is a film I really love. So Neil said, oh, I don't know, man. And then the next day he said, I was thinking about what you said. What do you think if I just did it alone as just a solo, mostly electric guitar thing? And he played me a few things, some little ideas he had, little chord progressions. And I said, I kind of think that would be maybe the best approach, but it's really what you feel, And he was like, that's it. I'm going to do that. Okay. So then I went back to New York, and he'd send me little sketches here and there, but it was all so beautiful. Right. And then we just recorded it live too, the film, later in San Francisco in a big warehouse. I think Neil borrowed the Rolling Stones mobile sound truck or something. And it was really cool. He just played through the film over a 2-day period, maybe 3 times. And we had this incredible score from him.
Yeah. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Criterion version has some video of that, maybe?
Yes, I made a little video while he was recording. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's wild. It makes me, I mean, I wonder what the Neil plus the Nirvana rhythm section would have resulted in, but the Dead Man's score is such a evocative and one of my favorite Neil Young things. For a long time, it was hard to find it at all. I have a CD copy that I got at some point, but a couple of years ago, I think the Neil Young Archive put it out on vinyl, and I upgraded. But yeah,
I think they're going to put it back out, or maybe they did. I don't know, but
yeah,
Neil always has so many things, and of course, we lost Elliot Roberts, who was irreplaceable to say the least. You know, that guy, what a human being. I don't know, that guy was incredible.
You know, the thing about, and you're right though, there's so much Neil, and that's why I'm so thankful for the archives, which is such there's not a lot of artists who are doing it like that, with that level of care and that level of attention to keeping this stuff.
Oh man, I go in the archives almost every morning. You know, I just check in, and then those little porch and fireside films that Daryl Hannah filmed of Neil.
Yeah.
There's a little series. Those are just beautiful little jewels, I think, you know.
So
Neil's he'll play to some chickens, or, you know, or he'll be out on the porch, or he's by the fire. Those are just lovely films. I love those.
Yeah. Well, I talked a little bit about how Patterson was sort of centered on routines. And sort of the rhythm of daily life. But sometimes your films are sort of about the opposite of that, you know, sort of being a stranger in a strange land, like Mystery Train, or The Dead Don't Die, which is sort of basically about the world ending, more or less. I walked out of the...
Yes, it is pretty much. It gets pretty dark intentionally, but...
I walked out of the theater of that one, you know, and I was so surprised by it, because I guess I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't whatever I must have been expecting, because there's this sort of, it's got this B-movie sort of genre horror thing happening, but then there's this almost like Looney Tunes charm that's in the mix. And then with all of that, though, I get the sense that the dread that sort of pulses through the movie is very real and very serious as well. You know, that sense that things are going sideways in our world, and clearly we saw that with the pandemic, but you could see it before the pandemic too. You know, the apocalypse.
Well, we could see it with the climate crisis very clearly in 1970. You know,
right.
So come on, for 50 years at least, we've been seeing, you know, it's been we've been denying it forever.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened. That film, The Dead Don't Die, I'm proud of the film because it has a very weird balance. And I don't know. I really think I think it's funny, and it wasn't intended to be. So a lot of horror people, they don't like it. And I understand, because the last thing I wanted to do was make a horror film where tension builds. Here comes the monster.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's not what we were trying to do at all. So we're trying to make a kind of sort of silly, strange, you know, comedy that then ends with a kind of dread and darkness, you know, that I don't know. I don't want to analyze it. I don't know what to say about it, really.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it was very, very hard to make. That film was really traumatic, just physically to pull off, or I don't want to go into all the reasons. But so it's kind of like, okay, I don't know. I always move on, you know, like the Only Lovers soundtrack thing that, I don't watch the films once I'm done with them, really,
Right,
so
right.
I haven't seen Only Lovers since 2013, and I haven't seen The Dead Don't Die for several years, and nor will I ever see them again.
Right. You just got to let them. What do you think motivates that letting go? Is it just that?
Well, you just got to go forward. I don't like looking back. I don't like analyzing it. I don't want to see the mistakes I made. I don't want to see how would I do it different now? We did it, and making films is very difficult. It's people who don't make films have no idea how hard it is. It's really it'll kick your ass,
Yeah.
So I remember Werner Herzog once telling me, we must be like athletes because to make a film is insane and we're out of our minds to attempt such a thing. And so, it's so hard. So once you've done it and you give it your all, I got to walk away. They're like, okay, they're like my children now. They go out in the world. I can't take care of you now. I gave you everything I have and good luck to you,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't want to dwell necessarily just on The Dead Don't Die, but I do want to note that I'm a huge fan of Steve Buscemi, and he is so funny in that movie and so deranged. He's almost doing something like he might do in almost like some of those Adam Sandler movies that he's in or something. Just this sort of like wacky. I mean that as a compliment for sure. I'm a huge fan of him. You guys go way back, right? Like,
yeah, we go way back to the late 70s. We've been friends, and he lives near me some of the time up here in the Catskills, so I get to see him.
Oh, really?
I just love Steve. I've always been in love with Steve. He's just the best, and he's such a great actor. But we had a funny thing while we were shooting The Dead Don't Die. At one point, somebody said to him, because he's wearing that pseudo MAGA hat.
Yeah.
And somebody said, Steve, what if like people come up to you in a restaurant or something and give you shit about that hat? No, he said, and then he said, no, I'm worried they're going to come up to me and say, we're having a meeting. Maybe you want to, Steve was thinking, I'm more worried about that.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, that's, that's, so you guys were sort of in the same, I mean, kind of in the no wave thing, right? I mean, more or less associated.
Oh,
with
yeah,
that?
yeah. I used to see Steve perform with Mark Boone Jr., Mark and Steve in these clubs in the Lower East Side. And, before Steve had even been in a film, they did these kind of very weird comedy duo skit stuff that was very dark and strange and hilarious,
Yeah.
And we had John Lurie and Rocket's Red Glare. And we were always going to see them, Steve. And then Steve was a bartender at First and a bar we used to hang out too. I think both Mark Boone and Steve were bartenders there. So
yeah.
It was just, we go way back, Steve. And then, Joe Andres, Steve's wife, who unfortunately we lost, was an incredible artist and choreographer and filmmaker. And so the two of them were just always fascinating people. I just love them. I love Steve.
You've always been very, very open about sort of drawing inspiration sort of from wherever it may present itself. Do you think that was that an ethos that you can tie back to those early days? Do you think was that something that you feel like you might have picked up on the spirit of the time and carried that forward? Does it feel that way to you?
Wait, what?
The early days, sort of the early no wave days.
But carried what through? Sorry, that's like a.
Just that. Yeah,
stoner response. Wait, what?
Well, it's probably a response to some sort of stoner question too.
Well,
what I was sort of asking was about, you've always
openness to things.
To just being inspired.
I think it comes from honestly my mom and her mother, my grandmother, because my mom was a writer. She was a film reviewer before she got married. for the Akron Beacon Journal. But my mom and my grandmother were always very open to all kinds of forms of expression. My grandmother was a school teacher with no money, but she used to refinish furniture in her basement and then trade it to like gypsies and these Persian rug dealers that would come in a van smoking these black cigars. And she was very open to lots of strange kind of, appreciation of things. My grandmother used to cut images out of magazines of famous paintings and then frame them and put them up. Wow. She'd have little Rembrandts that she took out of a magazine, but put in a nice frame she got in a garage sale or whatever, but very highly aesthetic. And they were always very open to, different forms. My mom told me she got to see Artie Shaw play once, and, she got to meet Roy Rogers, and she covered the wedding of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall because they got married in Ohio. So she got to cover it. She got to take a train to New York to write about Marlon Brando when he appeared on Broadway before he even made movies.
Wow.
And she came back, and I don't know if it was Streetcar or what, and she wrote a review referring to him as having animal magnetism or something like that,
Yeah.
And my mom, she loved Robert Mitchum, but she loved James Thurber. She loved, Renaissance painting. And my grandmother, she listened to Charlie Pride records in her basement while refinishing furniture and then going upstairs and reading Proust, and, in a very modest, tiny little, she had no money or anything. So I think they really opened my brain when I was little to, and also my grandmother really instilled an interest in indigenous and Native American culture for me. We took a trip to Southern Ohio together to see the Indian mounds, and she used to give me arrowheads for my birthday.
Yeah.
And she got me really interested in that, which is still a huge part of my soul of, my interest and appreciation for, Native culture in America and all over the planet, indigenous cultures,
Yeah.
So I think it came from them, really,
You mentioned making a book of collages, which I didn't actually realize was the case, but I'm really excited to see that eventually.
Thanks. Yeah. They're very minimal. I'm very inspired. I love newsprint. So they're only made of newsprint. And then put on, and often all I do is often replace heads or remove things, So, but yes, I love making these little collages, and I try not to think while I'm doing them. I listen to music. I always do them in a kind of peaceful way in my little studio, and I have hundreds of them, Yeah. And I'm a big fan of collage art, or the whole form of collage, and also how it spills into music and other forms, for sure.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I was thinking the other day, my collages and my poems and my music, they all kind of follow a similar procedure of putting things together that might not immediately seem like they go together, like when I make music, I'm gathering tracks. I'm not trying to make a structure except occasionally I write songs that do have a verse and a chorus and a breakdown, but
sure.
Mostly I'm more avoiding that. And it is a kind of related to collage, certainly in the way that John Cage and Brian Eno and all of dub music and all of hip hop, take disparate things and make something new out of them. But yeah, I'm excited about my book of collages and then my show that's coming up in the fall.
Well, that's great, and I can't wait to check it out. And Jim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk with me about all this stuff. I feel like I could just keep going and going and going, but I should.
Well, I did want to talk a little bit about the Only Lovers soundtrack.
Let's do it. Yeah, I love that soundtrack.
Because, that's coming out it's being re-released on our friends Sacred Bones, Caleb Bratton, who has so many artists on their label that we love. And, we made it was originally on All Tomorrow's Parties, ATP Records. Barry and Deborah, we worked with them a lot on, they put out our first SQÜRL EPs. They also did these really beautiful things, I gotta say. This is Barry Hogan and Deborah Hagens from All Tomorrow's Parties. When Only Lovers came out, they put together these events, which were concerts that had White Hills played, Jozef Van Wissem played solo, Zola Jesus played, Yasmine Hamdan played, and SQÜRL played. We played live shows, but they also had these rooms they recreated from the film, and they'd have vampire nurses giving people little shot glasses of blood, in quotes, when you entered, or,
yeah.
Oh man, they did these beautiful things, and they put them on in Berlin, Cologne, London, Paris, and New York. And this was these ATP, and I also did I curated an All Tomorrow's Parties, and they used to do those incredible those festivals, right? And they did it with no corporate funding. And eventually they, I don't know, they had financial problems, and our record was sort of out of print. So we kind of took it back from them. They agreed we should take it back.
Sure.
And, but I just got to say, the things they did for the film and just their imaginations and what they did some incredibly beautiful things for us. So initially we were on ATP, but now we're putting it back out on Sacred Bones because it had gone out of print. And, Sacred Bones put out SQÜRL's, we did a record, Some Music for Robbie Mueller, fairly recently. They put out a kind of almost stoner metal EP that SQÜRL did called EP 260.
Yeah.
They put out a record with me and Jozef, at least one of them. We love them. They're a fantastic label, and we're excited. We're going to do some more things with them in the future. But I do have to mention ATP because they've had some trouble, I guess, just financially. How could you not in this world if you first started out avoiding corporate financing,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, I don't know what problems they've had exactly, but I got to take my hats off to them for what they did for Only Lovers Left Alive. They did some beautiful stuff. So.
Well, and it's such an evocative soundtrack. It's such a cool of all of your films. I mean, it's almost impossible to separate the music from the films, but with Only Lovers Left Alive, it's especially difficult to do so because it's all sort of this connected thing, and the variety of tones, from sort of these like very almost spooky things to these just like ecstatic and beautiful things. It's a great thing. And then of course you've got that incredible version of Funnel of Love, which is mind blowing. So yeah, it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, well, I'm a Wanda Jackson fan, and I've always loved that song so much. And I got to see Wanda Jackson once at the Continental Club in Austin, Texas, years ago, where Elvis used to play and shit. Cool, really cool little club. But, it was really funny because Shane, that's Madeline Follin from Cults, who did the vocal for us. And Shane Stoneback, he brought her in and made her stay in the studio like a whole night long, I think, making her drink whiskey and go out and smoke cigarettes. And her voice got kind of damaged, but she is what a sweetheart to do that for us, and what a beautiful kind of version. And Shane kind of put that version together and got Madeline in there, and that we really love that. And then Jozef got Zola Jesus to do something on one track. And of course, we have Yasmine Hamdan, the incredible Yasmine Hamdan, doing a track. So, we like the idea because the movie takes place in Detroit and Tangier, and it's about the past history of human expression. And I don't know what it's about, but it's kind of weighing old things and new things.
Yeah.
And so having Jozef's lute with our kind of molten guitar approach and drums, it just seemed like it was really a kind of pleasure to find how these things intersected kind of intuitively together.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's incredible.
Carter Logan and Jozef and Shane and I were really the elements of SQÜRL at that time. And Carter and I continue, and we still, connect with Shane and Jozef for sure.
Well, it sounds like there's plenty of more interesting stuff forthcoming, more of you moving ahead. I appreciate it. Before we go, though, I do want to ask one last question. In Down by Law, Tom Waits is a Lee Baby Sims. That's his DJ persona.
Right.
Now I decided I don't want to ask you this because it might be ruining something fun, and I don't want to ruin something fun. I was going to ask if when in Night on Earth we hear Tom Waits on the radio, and I've always just assumed it's the same DJ, but I don't want to. I don't know. I might have to cut this out of the podcast because now I'm like, why ruin the mystery? I don't know.
Well, it's intended to be, or at least it's intended that you would make the connection to wonder.
Sure.
So I guess the intention was to provoke you to ask the question without really answering it.
That's perfect. No, that's exactly
kind of
right.
left field answer. Tom, because Tom had some of that stuff he had. I don't know. He knows all that pattern stuff. He loves all that, like, the records go round and round and the sound and, all that stuff.
Yeah, he's got such a great DJ voice in Down by Law. I love when he does his little demonstration. But
did you ever listen to the radio shows that Bob Dylan hosted? He had his own radio what was it called?
Theme Time Radio Hour, yeah.
Yeah. And one time he introduced a record by saying, some say that this singer some say that this singer's voice sounds like a bowl full of rusted nails, but I say it sounds beautiful. Here he is, Tom Waits. And he played a Tom track. It was so good.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for talking. I mean it. It's a huge honor, and it's really, really great to have you on the show.
Jason, thank you. I could talk on and on with you. It's been really fun. I don't know. We talked a lot. I don't know what we talked about, but
it was all good.
Yeah. Oh, White Hills. I mentioned they were part of our tour too. That we did in supporting the film. They appear in Only Lovers Left Alive.
Yeah, well, how about we go out? We'll play a little of one of their songs on the way out.
Excellent. I love them. Okay, thank you so much, and good luck with all you do. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully, we'll speak again at some point.
All right, Jason. I look forward to it.
All right, take it easy.
All right. Okay, take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Jason Woodbury. I write, host, and produce Transmissions. Our audio is edited by Andrew Horton. Sarah Goldstein and Jonathan Mark Walls create visual assets. And our executive producer is Aquarium Drunkard founder Justin Gage. We'll be back next Wednesday with another all-new conversation for you to check out. I'll be joined by the synthesist Colleen. Check out her great album, The Tunnel and the Clearing now, if you want to get a little heads up on what we're going to be discussing next week. Stay safe until then. Take care of yourself and take care of others. We'll speak with you next week on Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions.